We have definitely made mistakes buying gear, including buying a $2,000 lens that ended up accidentally being gray market and we couldn't get it repaired. Not to mention we've gotten a lot of emails and messages from you telling us about your gear buying mistakes, so we wanted to go over them now to help you avoid the mistakes we've seen made and give you some tips on how to buy gear better.
Yeah, hopefully this will save you thousands of dollars. First, a word from our sponsor, Squarespace.
Yeah, definitely not a mistake because Squarespace is affordable, easy to use, and makes your photos and your website look professional, simple, clean. And you can get a free trial for 14 days, no credit card needed. Use the coupon code Chelsea to get 10% off when you decide you like it. Go into the description. That's squarespace.com/Chelsea, CHELSEA. Thank you, Squarespace.
Squarespace just set up a whole new feature for adding different types of stores for just about anybody who wants to do online e-commerce, so definitely go check that out. First, my gray market mistake. I bought a Nikon 7200 f2.8. At the time, it was one of the biggest purchases we've ever made. It was like $2,200. So I really combed the internet looking for the best deal possible, and I found a used one in great condition on eBay. I got it. We used it for like a year, maybe a little bit less. And then suddenly it stopped working. It just completely flaked out. So of course it was still in the warranty period. I sent it off to Nikon along with the receipt and they said, oh no, we can't service this. This is from the Philippines or some other country. You're in the United States. Unless you have an address in that country, we cannot service it for you.
How would you have known that?
As far as I know, there was no way for me to know. I mean, I guess I could have looked at the serial number and run it through something, but I wasn't aware of that. It's not like they have a little flag, like only use this in the Philippines. So suddenly it was just a brick because Nikon wouldn't service it, and I was out $2,200. And I talked to many different repair places who said no, because even third-party places have to get the parts from Nikon, and to do that, they have to give the serial number to Nikon. Finally, I found a repair place that bent the rules a little bit. And they had another Nikon 7200, and they sent in that lens's serial number just to get me the replacement part so I could get it to work. But if that hadn't worked out, then that would have just been a paperweight. And that's a really expensive paperweight.
So you have to make sure when you're buying your gear that it's not gray market. How do you avoid that then? Just buying from reputable dealers?
Absolutely. It's all the dealers that you haven't heard of, whether it's on Amazon or eBay. But also there are reputable dealers who will sell you gray market stuff, and they'll tell you about it. Fortunately, they'll say, okay, this doesn't come with a manufacturer warranty, but it comes with our warranty. If it breaks, we will repair it. But then you have to ask what happens after the warranty period is over, knowing that most repair places will not be able to get the parts from Nikon. Generally, you want to avoid it, though gray market can save you a couple of $100 up front. I think it's okay if it's a part that's so inexpensive it probably won't be repaired. You know, a $200 lens usually isn't worth repairing, so maybe it's worth taking the risk on that.
All right, another mistake that I see is that people tend to buy one piece of gear at a time looking at the price, but not looking at the full price of their kit. So if you're buying a camera that seems inexpensive compared to other cameras at its level, you have to look at the lenses that you might get too to make sure that your total price of your kit is a reasonable price for you. And this happens a lot. You can get a camera that's $200 cheaper than the competitor, but then the lenses are 40% more expensive. So make sure when you're choosing a new camera or a lens, you're pricing out your entire kit you'll use.
This used to happen a lot with Sony because they price their bodies really low and then their lenses really high. And well, now they have a more full spectrum of lenses on the low end too. But what the conclusion often is when you use this technique is you end up buying a DSLR, because the DSLR lenses tend to be a lot less expensive, even though they produce similar results.
Yeah, and that kind of can lead to people, our next one that I see, people putting all of their money into one piece of gear. And so I will see problems happen. I'll get messages from you. Well, you'll get the most expensive camera that you can afford, and then you're putting your old lens on it that's maybe a kit lens. And you're wondering why this brand new expensive camera with more megapixels, more resolution, more everything is not taking better pictures than your old camera. And it's because you're sticking a low-end incompatible lens on it, and it's kind of ruining your whole setup. So
yeah, I see people with $3,000 lenses and $200 cameras, or vice versa.
Yeah.
And it's like getting a Ferrari and then putting some golf cart tires on it.
That sounds awesome.
Okay, maybe that would be fun. So just try to balance your kit out.
Yeah, and you can do this by researching which pieces of gear work well together. Of course, you know about us because you're on our channel, but you can go other places and talk to other photographers about what they're using.
Here's a tip. Don't put a kit lens on a 50 megapixel camera body. Like if you have the budget for 50 megapixels, you better also have the budget for some sharp lenses or you're just wasting space.
Yeah.
Another problem I see is that people are planning to upgrade to full frame, so they buy an APS-C body, but then they buy really expensive full frame lenses for it. But then I'll see them years later, and they're still using that APS-C body with the full frame lenses. And I know it can be a little controversial. There's a lot of people who have misunderstandings around this, but you definitely get lower quality results when you mismatch the lens and the body. All our testing shows you get the best results with APS-C lenses on APS-C bodies, full frame lenses on full frame bodies, and mismatching them either way significantly degrades your results and also wastes a bunch of the money for the gear that you're carrying around.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with waiting until you're ready to go full frame if that's what you want to do, and then sell your entire old kit. You don't have to mix and match until you get there. Just sell the whole kit at once. There are easy places to do that. And then you'll be getting the best pictures you can when you're shooting APS-C, and when you finally make that shift to full frame, you can do it all at once and get great pictures doing that.
We have been tortured over the years by trying to adapt lenses to different bodies.
Yeah, we've learned this one the hard way.
Absolutely. Like we used to love the GH4 because it was like the first camera that could do 4K and 60 frames per second, but we didn't get great results with any of the Micro Four Thirds lenses. So I would always adapt APS-C lenses, and that would be okay, except those adapters were speed boosters and they had extra optics in them, and so it completely killed the autofocus, but also added in all this flaring. And then we really liked the Sony bodies for video. But at the time, Sony didn't have any good lenses, like early in the Sony E-mount era, so we were adapting our Canon DSLR lenses to it. But then the autofocus sucked, and it would screw up our shots a lot, both still and video. And now I just have this policy where I just try not to use an adapter. If there's a lens I like, I just pick the best body for that lens instead of trying to mismatch things.
Yeah, I'll still use an adapter, but I always keep in mind that something might go wrong with it. It might not have a really solid attachment. The autofocus might not work as well. So if I plan on using an adapter, I make sure that I test it and make sure that the adapter is okay with the lens that I'm using.
This has been hitting me this week because
Yeah.
I've been filming with the Canon R6 and I like to use a 24 f1.4, but the only Canon 24 f1.4 is a DSLR lens. So I'm using their mirrorless to DSLR adapter. And even though they're both Canon, the autofocus just isn't great. And people have noticed. They complain like, oh, Tony, your focus is hunting in and out. And I'm like, yeah, I made that mistake.
You tried to have it all. You tried to have it all with the adapter.
I know. And I guess I just have to go back to Sony because they have a mirrorless 24 f1.4 and I'm switching.
You're dropping that here. You need to be like me. You need to make a whole video about it now.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I look forward to seeing that. Okay, here's another tough one. And this one, I like a good bargain. So this one has been a tough lesson for me. But buying third-party gear can be tough. You can make some mistakes. I know there are definitely unsexy accessories like batteries where I just wanted to save a couple bucks and buy third-party.
Batteries seem so overpriced.
They don't work well. It's a lie I keep telling myself. The batteries I've tried, they don't work as well as name brand.
Well, oh, they were great for like 6 weeks.
Yeah.
But then you pop it in your camera after 6 months and you'll get 20 shots into a shoot and suddenly it's blinking red.
Yeah.
That is the consistent frustration I have. And so we just outlawed third-party batteries after trying it like 8 times because I'm such a cheapskate. They're like a quarter the price of the name brand ones. I don't want to spend it, but it screws you over.
Third-party flashes have been okay.
Yeah, we still recommend the Godox flashes. The lenses, it's been hit or miss. We have used some great third-party lenses, and we used to use them almost 100% of the time. We were all about Sigma and Tamron lenses. But then over the years, you accumulate little bits of pain, little bad experiences where some autofocus problems, some stabilization problems, some camera lens incompatibility screwed up an important shoot. And I hate that, and I really don't want to repeat it. And for me, nowadays, it's usually worth it for me to go for name brand lenses with that confidence that I'm not going to run into those one-off problems at some point months down the road. Not something happens every day.
But I still think that third-party lenses can be a really great option if you need to fit something into your budget. If you can't buy used, like name brand, to fit it into your budget, third-party can be great. I would just say get a lot of experience with it and know it really well, because we tend to use a lot of gear and shift our gear around and substitute new and sell old. Some people stay with the same lenses for 10 years and don't switch. So if you very intimately know your lenses, I think it can work, but I'd be careful.
Well, I get emails from people on two topics with third-party lenses. They say, this lens isn't autofocusing well. Either it's not tracking autofocus well, or it's just consistently missing autofocus. And the other thing I hear is, I sent this lens for service, and this third-party lens manufacturer's, their service is terrible. So I don't even want to get specific about it, but also think about where you have to send it when you do need to get it serviced. Sometimes it's better to pay a little more upfront and know that your service options are going to be superior.
Speaking of good service, Tony, we have a lot of Squarespace websites now. They only comp one, by the way. They do give us one free one as our sponsor, but we bought a lot of them, and they work incredibly well. We haven't had any problems with them. They format right onto your phone easily, so if people go to your website on their phone, it doesn't have the buttons in strange places. The format isn't messed up. It's just seamless, and it makes my photos look great, professional, and clean. I highly recommend Squarespace, and you can get a 14-day free trial. No credit card needed. You don't have to remember to cancel. You just get to try it. And I know you're going to want it after that. So go to squarespace.com/Chelsea, and when you buy it, you can get 10% off with the coupon code Chelsea. That's CHELSEA. I'm also really excited because I set up a gallery where people can buy prints. And it was super easy.
Yeah, they have a lot of new store features that seem to work really, really well.
So
check it out. It's free. Check it out.
If someone buys your print, you can just pay off that month's Squarespace.
There you go.
Pays for itself. Tony, here's another issue that I see where I want to save people money, because I see people buying features that they don't need. We actually made an entire podcast about this. If you need the latest and the greatest features, and often you don't. So here's an example. Someone will see that a lot of people love the new camera that's out. The frame rate's really high. It's expensive. It has a ton of megapixels, and they buy it, and then they're really just doing like still life photography. So they don't really need the super high frame rate that costs a lot of money. They don't need the 4K video uncropped. They don't need video at all. So why spend all of that extra money on the features you aren't going to use when you could put that money towards a camera that's going to work better for you? It might not be the latest, the greatest, the sexiest, the new features, but it could have more reliable features for you that you're going to use all the time. So instead of just getting convinced to buy the newest and the greatest, think about which features you love and use, and look up the cameras, used, new, whatever, that will work for you.
Yeah, the number one mistake people make is they ask me, which camera should I buy?
Yeah.
And they don't say, which camera should I buy for landscape photography, for portraits, for sports? These are specialized tools, and you should already know what type of photography you're into before you buy anything except an entry-level camera. And if you're not looking for specific features for your type of photography, then you need to do a little more research first. Another mistake that people make is assuming that newer is always better. This is often not true, especially when operating within the constraints of any kind of budget. Like if you have an unlimited budget, then especially the newest cameras do tend to be the best. But on restricted budgets, most people are going to be better off buying a previous generation camera and a series of lenses in order to get the most out of it, just kind of consistently.
Yeah, I had a friend, she shoots headshots and family shoots professionally, and when the A7R III was pretty new, she asked to borrow mine. I think she was shooting with the Nikon D750.
A DSLR.
Yeah, so I let her borrow mine, and we're really close. She's honest with me. She was like, I didn't really like it. I don't need all those features. Spending that much more money doesn't make sense because it's just not going to make me more money in the long term. And so she got to try the newest and the greatest camera, and it wasn't for her.
If it ain't broke, don't fix
If
it,
it
right?
ain't broke, don't fix it.
Like, I detect autofocus is cool, but if you're not having problems with autofocus, then it doesn't give you anything.
Yeah. I mean, I love it.
Yeah, I
But
love it too.
also, it doesn't matter because this is my job, so I can just buy all the newest, coolest toys. So
Chelsea, we use multiple cameras for different tasks.
a little spoiled.
True, but people often approach us and they say, okay, I want a light camera for travel that I can capture landscapes and make big prints with and shoot my kids' sports and also do some birding.
Yeah,
And that's too much.
it's a lot.
That's like saying you want one car that can be a sporty little scooter for the city that can also haul 1,100 pounds of mulch and fits in your 7 kids when you need to take them to soccer.
What is that? Because I actually do need that.
Yeah, that would be nice,
That
right?
would be really nice. Yeah, this one's tough because I understand because I'm not actually a specialized photographer. I like to take pictures of everything. And so I deal with this very real problem where I've decided that I just like to use multiple cameras. And that does sound expensive, but I think it could actually be an affordable option to divide your budget and buy multiple cameras for your needs. So you could have like an X100V Fuji like I have for $1,000 and then get like a D500 for wildlife for, what are those going for, like $1,000?
Yeah, somewhere in there, or a D7500, for example. We tested as one of the best wildlife cameras. Pretty inexpensive. It's a DSLR. It would not be great for travel. They're both kind of bulky cameras, but
Yeah.
that's why you have the Fuji.
Yeah, so you could consider dividing your budget up that way. I know this is a little overwhelming. We're talking about all this research and stuff, but I really just want you to start thinking outside the box. You don't have to think about getting this one great expensive piece of gear. You can buy used, you can save money in different ways, you can split up, different cameras that do different things better. So just be creative about what you actually need here. Oh, here's a really good example of a problem many people have, and it's trusting specs on cameras and not thinking about how they might actually work in the real world. And this happened to me. It was when mirrorless cameras were new, and like the frame rate's insane compared to DSLRs. The autofocus was great. I thought this is going to be my wildlife camera. It's going to be amazing. So I get out there, and it's true, the frame rate was really high, the autofocus was good, but the latency through the viewfinder was so bad that I couldn't track a subject. By the time I would track it, it would be slow enough that the subject would be gone. I would lose it. And so all of these specs that looked perfect on paper didn't actually work in the real world.
And there was no spec for latency, right? Like that doesn't, the manufacturer never even mentions that, so it wouldn't have occurred to you that that was going to be a problem.
No, and the same thing would also happen with the frame rate where it'd be like, yeah, it gets like 20 frames per second, but it can't track that many pictures with autofocus, so only 5 are in focus.
Yeah,
And so I
common problem.
don't really want a bunch of out of focus pictures. That's actually a pain for me when I'm editing. I would rather have 5 in focus pictures and just know you're going to get 5. So how do these specs on paper actually look in the real world? And you can figure that out by looking up reviews of the gear for people that are using it in the way you're using it. So in my example, using that camera for wildlife. If you're taking street photos, look it up and see if anyone has made a review for street photos. Look in forums and see how people are using it. And sometimes that means just waiting until the gear is a little bit older and people have more experience.
I also frequently see people suffering with a piece of gear that doesn't suit them, and they'll tell me that it was recommended by people on a forum. This is difficult because the people on the forum tend to be camera owners, not professional camera reviewers. They tend to research something, spend a lot of their money on it, and then once you do that, there's something called confirmation bias that makes you want to be satisfied with something that you purchased. And these people will dedicate a lot of time into working around the problems and the quirks with their gear and figuring out how to get good results with what was perhaps the wrong piece of gear.
So it's a good place to get information on how to make the best of your gear.
Yes, and forums can be a great place to find complaints because there will also be people on there that say, oh, I'm struggling with this, it doesn't work. But watch out for the people who get mad at the complainers, who tell them that everything is user error. It's easy to dismiss complaints in forums, but do take them seriously. And I like to kind of go through a forum and count the number of complaints about a piece of gear, whether it's camera equipment or a car or something else. And that gives me a better picture of what it's actually like to own and use that piece of gear.
I actually have a method for this whenever I buy something. I always consider the source. So I think forums are a great resource to go find information. I think review channels like ours are, but then you also have to consider the bias that we see a ton more gear than the average person. We're more picky. I think we're going to skew a little more negative, where owners are going to skew more positive. So whenever I'm buying something, I look up the worst reviews, the best reviews, and the middle. And then I try to piece together the full story and read in between the lines a little bit. And so if someone's only giving a glowing review, nothing's perfect. If someone's only complaining, nothing's that bad. So I try to figure out the best and the worst and how it would actually apply to me. And that's what you're going to have to do when you do your research.
Our daughter was used car shopping recently, and for every car she would consider, I would look up that model's forum, and forums are always filled with people complaining about cars, but I would assess the severity of the complaints. Where they're like, oh man, the radio doesn't turn on automatically and I have to push the button every time I start my car, that's annoying. Or they're like, oh, the car left me stranded for the 3rd time this month. And we ended up getting a Toyota Camry because they're super reliable. But if you look at the other forums, some of them are a nightmare.
Okay, and lastly, I know we've been hitting you with a lot, but we want to talk a little bit about how to do your research and shop. And I think that we've given some helpful tips, is just finding the complaints and seeing kind of the worst that could go wrong. Definitely looking up different types of videos. So you want kind of harsh gear review videos. You want to look at the ambassadors and see what the people who love the gear are doing. And then of course look in forums and see how people who own the gear and are working around problems, what they're doing and what their experience is. Consider when you buy third party or gray market, what your decision will look like in the long term. Can you get it repaired? Will it be easy to sell? Things like that. Also consider you do not have to spend all of your money in one place on the best camera or the best lens. Think about how to spread it out in a way that's going to work for you. And thank you, Squarespace, for making this podcast possible. If you want to check out why we like Squarespace so much, go to squarespace.com/Chelsea and make your own website for 14 days for free. Use the coupon code Chelsea to get 10% off. That's CHELSEA. You have to spell it properly.
Thanks, Squarespace.
Tell us your tips. What mistakes have you made? Have you put the wrong lens on the wrong camera? Have you bought gear that just breaks and you can't get it repaired? Or you buy used and you get junk that's already broken? What's going on? Tell us in the comments down below.
Yeah, good idea.
Thanks.
Bye.